All right, today I'm going to talk about our solar system, the planets, and the size of our solar system. So, planets are, I don't know where I can put myself. Okay, I'll just go up there. Planets are classified according to their location in the solar system. So we have inner planets, those are the ones between the sun and the first asteroid belt. These are terrestrial planets, and they're mainly made out of rock. That's because they're closest enough to the sun where there's no ice necessarily on them. Then we have the outer planets, and these orbit outside the asteroid belt. So outside of that asteroid belt and between Mars and Jupiter are all the outer planets. And these are the giant gaseous planets, and they're usually made of ice because it's too cold out there, and gas. Those are the real big ones. The terrestrial planets tend to be a lot smaller. And we'll talk about those in a second. But here's the order of the planets. A nice mnemonic device for remembering all your planets is My Very Educated Mother Just Served Us Noodles. The inner planets are Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Then we have an asteroid belt. And then it's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Those are the outer planets. Okay, so we'll start with talking about the inner planets. Start with Mercury. So Mercury is the closest planet to the sun, although it is not the hottest. And roughly it takes, and just to give you an idea of how far from the sun it is, it takes light from the sun roughly about 3.2 minutes to reach Mercury. So if, as we discussed in class, the sun were to stop shining, Mercury would be the first to know because it only takes 3.2 minutes to reach Mercury. It doesn't have an atmosphere, which is part of the reason why it's not the warmest planet, even though it is closest to the sun. It has surface, but its surface temperatures are extreme. So it's either really close to the sun and really hot, or a little further away from the sun. And we'll talk about that when we get into orbits. And when it's not close to the sun, it's really cold because it doesn't have that atmosphere kind of trapping heat in. It does have a lot of craters and a lot of long, steep cliffs. So kind of like Grand Canyon all over the planet. Venus is the next one. It's the second from the sun. This is the warmest planet in the solar system, and it takes light roughly about 6 minutes to reach Venus, so almost double the amount of time it takes to reach Mercury. It is similar in size to Earth, and it has a very dense atmosphere. So the atmosphere, it'd be like putting a huge thick blanket around the planet, which causes the greenhouse effect, which I'm sure you've heard about, which traps heat. And the heat, surface temperatures on Venus can be anywhere from 4,500 degrees Celsius to 4,750 degrees Celsius. So it stays really hot all the time. Then there's Earth, that's us. We're the third planet from the sun, and it takes light roughly about 8 minutes to reach us. Water exists on Earth as both solid, liquid, and gas, and we have an atmosphere that protects us from meteors and the sun's radiation, but it's not so thick as to trap so much heat in. So it allows some heat out. That allows us to be basically kind of in that just right zone, as we talked about in class, the not too hot, not too cold, just right, so life can survive on it. Mars. Okay, Mars is the fourth planet from the sun. It takes light from the sun about 12.5 minutes-ish to reach Mars. It's called the red planet because its surface is covered in an compound called iron oxide, and it's present in the surface rocks, and it kind of gives the whole planet a reddish color. It has a thin atmosphere, which means it has really extreme temperatures. Again, just like Venus, it's either going to be really hot or it's going to be really cold. But it does have an atmosphere, a little bit of one, which means that winds and weather can generate, so we get dust storms and we get strong winds. It does have polar ice caps, kind of like us, so it does have water. It does have seasons, just like us, and we'll talk about how seasons work next week. And there is evidence that liquid water, was once present on Mars. Okay, so then comes the asteroid belt, which we'll talk about later. It's basically just a huge belt of a lot of asteroids, meaning they're anywhere from 1 meter to several 100 kilometers in diameter. And those guys just kind of orbit the sun I wouldn't say peacefully, but they definitely orbit the sun. And sometimes they get knocked out, and that's when we get asteroids that fly by our Earth, and we see them sometimes, and hopefully none will ever hit us. So now the outer planets. Jupiter. Jupiter's the first outer planet. It's the fifth from the sun. And while it took, if you remember Mars, it only took 12.5 minutes for light to hit Mars from the sun. Well, Jupiter, it takes 43 minutes. That's how much further out Jupiter is than Mars. It is the largest planet in our solar system, and the atmosphere, it does have one, is mostly hydrogen and helium. And because of that, it has many high-pressure gas storms. And there is that giant red spot, which you might have heard of, and I'm sure that we'll see tons of times when we talk about the different planets. But it's basically this giant red spot, which is a storm that's been raging for 1 billion years. And it has at least 60 moons, 4 of them with their own atmosphere. That means they're big enough to have their own atmosphere. And some of them, I think, are roughly about the size of Earth, too. That's how much bigger Jupiter is than Earth. Saturn. Saturn's the 6th planet from the sun, and it takes light almost double what it took to get to Jupiter, and that's about 79 minutes to reach Saturn. It's the second largest planet in our solar system, and it has a ton of rings. This is the one that we usually picture with rings. And the rings are made of hydrogen, helium, ammonia, methane, and sometimes water vapor. It has 31 moons, the largest moon being Titan. And Titan is one of the big ones that we are like, ooh, maybe it could support life. It is larger than Mercury, and it does have its own atmosphere. And then there's Uranus. This is the 7th planet from the sun. It takes light about 159.6 minutes, or 2 hours and 39 minutes to reach, that should say Uranus. It's large and gaseous. It has methane in the atmosphere, which gives it kind of a blue-greenish color. And it has a tilted axis of rotation. So instead of rotating around in a circle like this, it like rolls like a ball like this around its orbit. So yeah. And then the 8th planet from the sun is Neptune. It takes light usually about 4 hours and 6 minutes to reach Neptune. Remember, it only took 3 minutes to get to Mercury, and it takes 4 hours and 6 minutes to reach Neptune. So more than 4 hours longer. So it has a surface of frozen nitrogen and geysers that erupt nitrogen gas. So it's mostly frozen, except for randomly you'll get these geysers that gas will build up underneath that ice, and then they'll explode, and you'll get nitrogen gas that erupts out. So there was this space shuttle that, which we'll do a little bit of tomorrow, but there's this thing where we're going to look back at Earth from the edge of Neptune and turn right around and see it. And I'll show you guys this tomorrow, but this is the peek back towards Earth from Neptune. And that right there looks like a piece of dust. That's us. These are all sun's rays. That's us. And we'll talk about this when we listen to our podcast tomorrow in class. All right. So thank you very much.